Is everyone here? Giles? Gav? Ellie?
Where's Paul?
Oh, I don't know.
Maybe we should go and look for him.
No, Paul told us to wait for him here.
All right. Take it away, Ellie.
Okay, well, as you can see, we're smack in the middle of Something Who Bunker, about to record a podcast.
I can understand that part of it all right, but can't you explain the wider issues, Ellie?
Yes, alright. Gav, would you mind drawing the curtains?
Sure.
All ready? Slide 1. Tell me, who's that?
Radio Free Scarrow, isn't it?
Top of the class, Giles, top of the class. Here's another.
Oh, 42 to Doomsday.
Thank you very much, Richard. And our old friend?
The Missing Episodes podcast. Actually, where is Paul?
Perhaps we should check on him.
No, Paul told us we should stay here. Look, Ellie, are you going to show us podcast cover art all night?
Tell me what they have in common and I might stop.
Well, they're all Doctor Who podcasts?
Almost right, Giles. They're Doctor Who podcasts that people have actually heard of.
Yes.
Unlike this one. Look, I agreed to join you for this episode, but what's the point if no one's listening? Richard, more promotional effort. Gav, funnier anecdotes. Giles, better science. Let's make this an episode to remember. Where's Paul got to?
Oh, it's too late. Let's get cracking. So, hello and welcome to the podcast where we take something old, a Doctor Who story from the original series, compare it with something new, one from the new series, and add something borrowed, that sketch, to make Something Who. Yes, it's Something Who podcast, episode 57. I'm Richard, and we're back to discuss a couple of Doctor Who stories about cut-off villages. So first we'll examine third Doctor story, The Daemons, from season 8. And after that, we'll have a look at 13th Doctor story, Village of the Angels, from the most recent series. So with me to make this a local podcast for local people, we have, as our special guest, cosplayer and Who fan about town, Ellie, also known as TARDIS Monkey.
Hello.
We've got science and astronomy writer, Giles.
It's me.
And graphic designer and Dalek expert, Gav.
Hello.
A scheduling issue means that Paul is sadly missing this time, but we hope he'll be back soon. So, first up, The Daemons, by Guy Leopold. Or, I guess as we know them, Barry Letts and Robert Sloan. And directed by Chris Barry. I guess what was hammered home to me in this one was, the premise, I guess, is there's a rational explanation for everything. I guess that's what you're getting. And I suppose, probably not unconnected with that, is that it's 1970 or 71, and there's something in the air, I guess, about myths and legends and aliens and so on. So anyway, who wants to kick us off with some thoughts about the Daemons?
Yes, you've only just pointed out, but the Chariots of the Gods connection, I mean, that's 68, isn't it?
Yeah.
But all of that ancient astronauts thing that gets kicked off around there. And that's interesting considering, one of the other influences that we might be coming to presumably came up with it all on their own. The idea of godlike alien beings influencing our mythology and so on.
It's quite shamelessly derivative. I think the two biggest influences that jump out, I mean, I recently read this, so it may be a slightly unfair observation, but Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. Mild spoilers ahead. It's about a race of aliens who look like the devil who've been influencing Earth culture since the dawn of time. Mm-hmm. But also that you've got Quatermass and the Pit will still be lingering in the public consciousness about demonic-looking creatures in a archaeological dig and superstitious goings-on, which turn out to be sort of psychic science related. And I didn't check the broadcast date for this, but the Star Trek episode Who Mourns for Adonais, which culminates with a godlike creature pointing his finger and shooting his wrath at the the male lead and the female lead jumps in the way to save the day. So,
isn't that season 3 of Star Trek? It's quite late on anyway. If it's
Isn't that every other episode of Star Trek?
Apparently it was 1967 was that episode.
Okay, right.
it won't have been the UK broadcast date though, because
No.
I don't think we got it till 70 or 71. So
I don't know. We've all got the sort of start of when they started showing Star Trek etched in our minds because it was after the War Games, wasn't it? But
yeah,
I don't know whether they then kept up a regular pace after that, or what. But what we haven't done is where we all first saw this. So that would be an interesting question.
yeah. Go on, Ellie. Where did you come across the Demons?
It was actually one of the very first episodes I remember watching when I was a kid, and my granddad had recorded it off of UK Gold, and I remember it being in black and white as well. So it was funny, sort of. I didn't watch it in colour until the DVD came out, so I just remember it always in black and white, which I think gives it more atmospheric look to it anyway. But yeah, that was like my original place that I saw it. So good old VHS tape, kind of thing.
I was trying to work out when I first saw it. When was it on UK Gold? Because the 1993 repeats probably.
That was when they colorised it, was it?
Yeah, that was when they colorised it. But because the VHS release was colorised as well, it had the little
Yeah.
the little icon, the little paintbrush icon. I remember the Tomorrow's World episode where they talked about the colorization process. I've actually still got that on my VHS tape from the time. So I guess that was 92, 93.
Yeah.
Or ahead of that 93 repeat. So was the UK broadcast before VHS release? The BBC Two repeat?
Yes, I think that came out before the VHS.
Did
I
it?
think it would have been, yeah. I'm trying to think. I have a feeling I probably first saw this at I don't know, it might have been one of the hooky VHS copies my pal Tim got hold of in the mid 80s from his contact who was fairly high up in the DWAS at the time. So yeah, the old bootleg circuit as it was back in the day. I'm pretty sure it was then. It would have been high on the list of things I wanted to see. So because I'd read certainly would have read the novelisation.
Yeah. I think I first saw an episode of it in the 80s at a convention somewhere, in the video room. But which episode in which convention is lost in the mists of time. I don't think I actually saw the whole thing.
Video rooms, those were the days.
I don't think I saw the whole thing until that 1993 colorised version, though. But it might have been a black and white episode that I saw in the 80s. Can't really remember now. I mean, obviously, I first came across it as the Target book in about 1975.
Yes, I will have read the book first, thinking about it, because there were a couple of bits that when they come up on the TV show, they evoke the memory of the book, weirdly.
Which was written by Barry Letts, I think.
Yes, it was, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So the colorised version was apparently November, December 92.
Okay.
They broadcast it on BBC Two in the evenings. Yeah, so I think that was the first airing of that.
So Ellie, what were your impressions of the Demons when you first saw it?
It terrified me. Absolutely terrified me. Azal and all of that. I mean, when I watched it, I was probably 4 years old at the time.
Ooh, okay.
So it was quite early on. And all I remember is just Joe, the Doctor, and Azal in the crypt, and the Master being there. That was like just a scene that just stuck in my memory. And Bok, obviously, just running around.
Yeah.
But I found him more funny. Even when I was younger, I found him funny, just sort of in his tights and everything. But yeah, and for some reason, the Morris dancers scared me. I don't know why. Just because, when they got Pertwee and they're just circling him and everything, and he's just trying to get past, I was like, oh no, I don't like that, because it just kind of makes you feel a bit claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously they're nasty Morris dancers anyway, so you're not supposed to like them. So.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most effective bits of it. It's very Wicker Man. Obviously, that's the thing, and it goes down all these different routes. They have a lot of fun with all of these Hammer horror tropes and things, don't they?
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the most effective bits of it.
Yeah. I remember that when I was a boy, it seemed like Damaris Heyman appeared in almost every kiddies drama thing that was going. But I was surprised. You know how it is when you're a kid and everyone looks ancient. Watching it this time through, I mean, she wouldn't say that she looks young, but she doesn't look as old as I remember her looking.
Yeah, this is it, because as a kid, I always thought she was like the old woman in the village kind of thing. And you look at her now and you're like, no, I mean, you know, how with Damaris, like, how old she was now. Yeah, she's quite young, but I love that sort of, like, older presence she's got. Young in the face, but old at heart kind of thing.
Yeah.
She's 12 years older than John Levine in the Demons.
Yeah, they still play the, yes.
Oh, young man.
I hate to say this, but I always used to get her, and I think because of it's Olive Hawthorne, isn't it?
Yeah.
I always used to get her and whoever played Olive on the buses mixed up in my head, which I think is rather unfair on Damaris Heyman, to be honest.
The Wicker Man was after this, wasn't it?
I think so.
Oh,
Yeah,
good Lord, was it? Now, there's a question.
Well, I mean, I've just thrown that into the mix. Having spent the last 5 minutes discovering that Who Mourns for Adonais was broadcast 27th of April 1970 in the UK.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
So I strongly suspect that that's not a coincidence. But having answered
the
that
DVD
question,
commentary notes are pretty definitive that they think it was a rip-off. But I suppose maybe they're just putting together the same. Good Lord, yes. 1973.
Yeah,
1973. Okay, now that's making me wonder whether Robin Hardy watched the Demons and thought I'd have some of that.
Yeah.
I would have always had that pegged as being late 60s, but...
When was I know it's not a direct link. Well, actually, no. I was going to say the Stone Tape, but then I was thinking of Children of the Stones. I mean, none of those are directly linking into this, but they all have a similar kind of vibe. There was something in the air, but they were a bit later, weren't they?
Yeah, I would say so.
A decade later?
I don't know about a decade.
No, not a decade. 5 years later.
Probably when I was a kid.
Well, The Devil Rides Out was beforehand.
Yeah, I think
that was 68, and that's
strong
quite
influence.
That's quite folk horror, even if it is period folk horror. I guess that's kind of ground zero for that. And the other thing that comes into it, of course, is the actual chronicle dig on Silbury Hill.
Yep.
Which I think was also about 68, which they're very definitely giving a nudge and a wink to all of those. I mean, I have to say the only chronicle stuff I've ever seen has been Henry Lincoln wandering around Vendor Chateau talking about buried Templar treasure. And
so Chronicle was a series that ran for about 30 years, didn't it, from the 60s, and it was a sort of precursor to Time Team, but it had a bit of a broader format.
Yes, yeah.
And they had a run of episodes in, did you say the late 60s, where they sponsored a dig at Silbury Hill, which I think's the best Bronze Age monument in Europe, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I think they found pretty much nothing in there in the TV show, but
burrowed their way in there.
But it's definitely an influence on the Demons, and it's actually mentioned in the script. There are script notations to suggest that they draw reference to the Silbury Hill TV stuff.
Brilliant.
I mean, it kicks off with the Doctor in a really bad mood, which sort of seems to persist most of the way through the story. I mean, he has softened by about episode 5. But, we talk about Colin Baker and Peter Capaldi as being the doctors that kind of irritate people and are quite abrasive. But, I mean, I've forgotten, quite how Pertwee's representation can be a bit.
I always find him really abrasive, and he's so often so rude to the Brigadier, and he's quite often rude to Joe. Yeah.
I mean, I love it sort of when Pertwee, the Doctor, goes into the pub and then, all the villagers are there kind of thing, and he's like in a real urgency, like really sort of demanding and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's just like, you know, like, what are you doing, chap, kind of thing, like, you know, settle down. And then it's just the line about the wig that just absolutely floors me every time. It's so perfect.
That's great.
And I love that because, you know, it's that contrast, as you said, sort of like with Pertwee's demanding presence, and then suddenly he's taken down a peg and he's kind of like, oh, I don't know how to react to this. It's just brilliant.
Yeah. I wrote in my notes that Joe smooths the way in the pub, because Katie Manning probably did in real life quite a lot of the time.
Yeah. I mean, if you heard the stories of, like, Pertwee, you know, getting cheesed off and he rides away on the motorbike and everything, you can tell. This shoot, I mean, what was it? They were on location for 2 weeks in the freezing cold and wet and all that kind of stuff. And you can imagine there's going to be a limit to how much you're going to put up with and stuff.
Yeah. So and Joe kicks off talking about the age of Aquarius. I mean, I know that astrology is not very popular on this podcast, and I descended into internet hell trying to get my head around what exactly
I was going to say,
that
don't
was.
ask me to explain what it is.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I'm just going to mute myself now. So
no, apparently, yeah. If it is a thing, it started in the late 20th century and will go on for 2,000 years. So quite why anyone should get excited about it, I don't really know. It doesn't feel like it's like a moment in time or anything. But I suppose it was a thing that was again being talked about at the time.
I don't want to lay into this story too much because I know it is very well loved. But in terms of storytelling, I find it frustrating. Its strength is definitely as a character piece.
Yeah.
Because in terms of narrative, it's deeply confusing, and there were moments watching it today where I thought I had a handle on it, and then it all kind of slipped out of my grasp again. Broadly speaking, I get the Azal stuff, most of it, but so the point of the story is that there's no such thing as magic, and that everything can be explained by science, even if it is an alien science. But my frustration is that there is quite clearly magic being demonstrated throughout the story that has no in-universe explanation. It's full of cool imagery and fun concepts, and it's an ideas story, but most of those ideas don't pay off anywhere. The episode 1 opens with the mysterious storm, and you've got the weird creature scuttling across the ground, never explained. You've got the bit with the sign spins round that confounds the Doctor, never explained. You've got the policeman being possessed that tries to smash Miss Hawthorne on the head. Might be the Master, because she's a thorn in his side, no pun intended. But my issue is that she then uses magic to quell the magical happenings, and then he puts the rock down. So she either has accidentally, through studying the occult, gained some knowledge of Azal's scientific technology by accidentally repeating words connected to his tech. I don't know, it's just there's a disparity between what it's trying to say and what it actually shows us. I mean, what is Bok? I assume he is a statue that's been animated. Did the Master do that? Did Azal do that?
See, I always assumed it was Azal, like he had some special, I don't know. Yeah,
but he seems to be there and doing stuff at the Master's command, guarding the crypt. There's lots of examples of stuff that things are thrown up, like the Doctor makes fun of Joe for not correlating the shape of the miniature spaceship on the ground to the shape of the small tomb they're in, and he says, but look, we're in a thing that's the same shape as the thing, and he teases her for not picking up on that. But there's no follow-up on that. We don't have an explanation as to why that small room they're in is in any way connected to the shape of the spaceship, because presumably the spaceship at its full size is bigger than 10 feet across. So what is the suggestion? And who cares? It's just one of those moments, and it's full of these moments, like when Bok attacks and the Doctor uses quote-unquote magic to stop Bok, and Joe says, but there's no such thing as magic, and the Doctor says, but he thinks there is, as if that's an explanation as to what's just happened. And it's frustrating because there's a lot of kind of patronising stuff that makes you feel like, well, he's making fun of me for not being able to follow this, but then also there's actually no narrative explanation to an awful lot of the goings-on in the story. So I find it somewhat unsatisfying as a narrative, but the rest of it, I guess, makes up for it, because it's good character stuff, and there's some nice set pieces, and there's some good imagery. But I would like it to all make a bit more sense, please.
Ellie, you were going to say something.
Oh, no, I mean, I was just saying, sort of about the spells or whatever to stop Azal and everything. I mean, if you want to take a different approach with, Legopolis, and you could say it's like a block transfer computation kind of verbal thing that you say to the beast, and he's like, oh no, this is the right words that will defeat me kind of thing, because it's all to do with, the mathematics of the universe. I mean, that's like a take you could put on it if you wanted some kind of hooey element to it kind of thing. But yeah, I totally get it. It's definitely, the Daemons is definitely a more character driven plot, and I think that's why it's so adored by a lot of people, because you've got so many strong characters in it that even if the plot was, weak as anything, it's just they carry it, and that's just what makes it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great Doctor Who that doesn't stand up to any scrutiny. We talked at length about how Pyramids of Mars is just garbage from start to finish, but it's brilliant. I love it. It's wonderful. I won't have a bad word said about it, but it makes zero sense. You cannot scrutinise a lot of this.
Well, I like Time Flight, so that's very problematic in itself. So
yeah.
In fairness, there is a line. I only know that because I was watching episode 5 this afternoon before he came on. There is a line about the Doctor says the emotions of a group of ordinary human beings generate a tremendous charge of psychokinetic energy that the Master channels for his own purpose. And Miss Hawthorne then says, but that is magic. That's precisely what black magic is. So that kind of puts a bit of a...
Yeah.
Bit of a... if you want to then
take
that
and
run with it.
Yeah.
The randomness could be almost like a psychic storm has been whipped up, and there's odd goings on. I suppose you can ascribe odd goings on to the fact that it's driven by the minds of people, and therefore there is kind of thoughts and randomness and manifestations of our own.
For me, I always thought that when the policeman gets possessed kind of thing, it was the Master, but using Azal to almost project his psychic thoughts into this kind of time storm thing or psychic storm that possesses people, and that's how he's got control of this village. But Miss Hawthorne's strong enough willed that she's like, nah, screw you, mate, I can sort this out.
That works for me.
I've seen people comment and say, well, hang on, how come Azal is apparently making his influence felt before the Master raises him or wakes him up, but then in episode 5 doesn't Azal say, aha, I was waking up anyway? And
he does. He says I was on my way.
Yes, so
and
so
then
you kind
just
of can
happen to phone at the same time.
Yes.
You've reminded me, actually, I did have another minor
new psychic link. Who dis?
quibble. Very good. The Doctor springs into action at the start of the story, like he knows what's going on.
He does.
Yes.
And there's no kind of backstory to that. He rushes off to the dig as if he knows the world's going to end if that mound's opened up. But do we assume that he's aware of the demons being on Earth 100,000 years ago?
Well, he seems to be aware of the demons.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, because he knows who they are, because he's, that line where he's like, the Daemons from the planet Deimos kind of thing.
Yeah,
so...
and then Jo chips in, presumably as she's been fully briefed in a scene that we're not privy to, because she knows how many light years away Deimos is. She just goes, yes, Deimos is 60,000 light years away.
Yeah.
I guess that was a whole off-screen explanation.
Okay.
Must have been. Yeah, I mean, the Doctor has been to 100,000 BC.
True. Okay.
So maybe he came, I mean, obviously it was off screen. We didn't see it during An Unearthly Child or whatever we're calling that. But maybe he went back to 100,000 BC just to see how they were getting on and tripped over Azal at that point.
And his wrinkled stockings.
Yeah.
Yeah, bless
There
him.
are a few moments where it slides into
One of those suspension of disbelief moments, isn't it?
Yeah, the CSO Azal is a low point, and the polystyrene boulder with the polystyrene snow coming in.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're few and far between, these moments.
Yeah.
And they do make good choices.
Sorry, cheap shot.
They make some quite good choices. So they don't use CSO Azal in episode 2. Yeah, everyone's sort of looking up in the air, but it's just all assumed. And actually, even in episode 3 or 4, is it, where they're shooting from behind? You know, and it's again, you don't get to see the full horror until right at the end of episode 4. So I think that those are all wise choices.
Speaking of Azal's scale, something I noticed today that I'd always thought was a continuity issue or a production error before. The hoof prints seen from the helicopter are enormous.
That always annoys me, that bit, yeah.
And then when they go on the ground, they're much smaller. But apparently that's intentional. The idea was that Azal was shrinking as he walked and gets smaller and smaller and smaller as he finally gets to the crypt, which is how he's big enough to get through the door of the crypt. Because apparently there was a production shot intended that would have shown the footprints from the air decreasing in size. But you don't get that. You just get big ones from the air and then smaller ones on the ground. So it just looks like an awful error, but apparently not.
And in fact, even the heat shield thing in the Brigadier with his swagger stick or whatever it is, isn't a bad bit of, considering the budget of Doctor Who, it seems to work pretty well.
Yeah.
And chucking the rocks and the sticks and them exploding, that's all very neatly done.
It's really cool visual effects. I thought it was really effective. Even now, I still don't know how they did it. It's like really cool.
I can tell you it's very boring.
Okay, Gav, you can be the boring one.
They had a spring-loaded charge inside the prop with a nylon thread attached to a little piece that kept two electric contacts apart. So when they threw the prop that contained the explosive, the nylon string attached to the prop pulled tight, basically pulled the pin out as if it was a grenade, which allowed the detonator inside to make contact, and it set the explosive off in the prop midair. Which is why if you watch Nick Courtney picking that stick up incredibly gingerly, because he knows it could well go off in his hand.
Okay.
But I always thought that was just careful camera placement, and he threw the stick off screen at the moment it was detonated.
Somebody just throws a smoke bomb kind of thing.
Apparently it's all practically done.
Clever stuff, ingenious.
Very, very groovy civvies that Benton and Yates are wearing, finally out of uniform for the first
very
time.
much so.
Oh no, it's weird seeing them in civilian clothes. I go, oh no, I don't know if I like this.
Yeah, that was Barry Letts wanting to show sort of the private lives of the unit team, which is why we get the Brigadier in bed, and there was a potential to have his wife in shot. She was going to be Fiona Lethbridge-Stewart handing him the phone, but that was vetoed. We worked hard. I was part of the team, or I headed the team that did some of the cleanup for the Blu-ray. And the Benton's trousers were the most problematic thing of the entire, because that, particularly when they land on the lawn, they get out of the helicopter, and the red of his trousers bled into the green of the grass for about 2 feet to the right.
Wow.
So we had Kieran Hyman, Rich Tipple, and Anthony Lamb, and I forget which of them worked on Benton's trousers. Poor chap. But yeah, the civvies, the colour of those civvies,
It's an unforgiving task.
caused a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It looks
which brings
fantastic,
me
has to be
to Benton and Yates apparently watching a live rugby match at
Almost
midnight. At midnight.
Where's that happening?
Unless it's recorded, in which case one of them has been quite savvy in getting the other one to bet on the outcome.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have the internet in those days, mind you. They did have newspapers.
They did have
though.
newspapers. It wasn't the Bronze Age.
Yeah, that's true.
More to the point, if they had a video recorder, why weren't they recording Space Pirates a few months earlier?
Yeah.
Oh. I'd never noticed before that the BBC Three person who says that they've lost the signal, because that's Nick Courtney's voice.
It's
I've
Nick,
not
isn't
spotted
it?
that before.
Oh, is it?
Voice.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
We had something recently where Pertwee did a voiceover. Was it somewhere in
There's a
Ambassadors?
couple. There's one that's cut.
Yeah.
Is it the Sea Devils is cut?
I wouldn't have watched the Sea Devils recently. I know it's something I watched recently. So
He does it Inferno, doesn't he? But I don't...
Yes, that's it. Inferno's the one it's cut, because he does like a Lord Horhor, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah.
But I think there's a couple of others. But
Yes, I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
Benton is still interested in breakfast, isn't he? So Day of the Daleks isn't the first time that Benton's been hungry on duty. So yeah, it's all
one
part
track
of the thing.
mind.
Yeah, go on, John.
I was only going to say about with regard to BBC Three that old Fergus is very Michael Palin, isn't he? But I guess they were just drawing on the same kind of Alan Wicker kind of walking and talking kind of presenting style of the time.
Yeah. Was it Magnus Magnusson doing Chronicle at that point?
It was, yes, yeah.
Not that there's any great influence.
Oh,
there.
there's a connection coming up. Yeah.
All right.
Is there?
Well, because we've got Jamie
Iceland?
Magnusson is the director of our second story. Is his grandson?
No.
Yep.
No way.
Yep.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
Sally Magnusson's son. Yeah. Sally Magnusson's son. Yes.
I should have
Very
asked
good.
David Simeon if he based it off of that, his presenting style.
Good fact.
Yeah.
Matthew Corbett's in the Demons as well. That was that's my other fact to slip in at the end.
So Jamie Magnus Stone, but nevertheless, he is apparently Magnus Magnusson's grandson.
Wow.
Hence the
Yeah,
name.
I mean, I think the seems to me a very credible BBC presenter type thing. I mean, I believe in him completely.
Yeah.
The presenter at the start.
Is the professor bloke? Is he killed?
Yeah,
I meant to look
Yeah.
out for it.
He appears to
Get
be.
to know.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
believe there were scenes cut or in the draft script or somewhere that the pub was supposed to be littered with corpses, and the doctor was going to be one of them.
right.
But Joe kept saying, "No, I don't think this one's dead."
Yeah, no,
That
it's-
would have been fun.
Yeah,
I wonder whether that made it to the novel.
Yeah. Because it was only the two of them that got frozen,
Yes.
wasn't it, in the end?
I think the cameraman's one of the people that was supposed to have been killed
Right, well,
and would have been in the pub
Okay, right.
because he's wobbling all over the place.
And then the others just hightail it out of there, don't they? At the start of episode 2. So like, we're off, and we'll leave you. We'll leave the milkman to cope with the heat barrier. Quick, that's our contracts up for these 2 episodes. And, or however long we've. Well, I guess it was on location, so I guess it wasn't episode based. But yeah. In terms of the characters thing, I think the one thing that struck me that kind of disappointed me a bit going through it was that it felt like there was more potential for them to do something clever with the master's corruption of the villagers.
Yeah,
It starts looking like, oh, this is going to be very clever. He's going to turn them. He's kind of playing on their greed and these are all little men with inadequacy complexes, and
Yeah.
he's going to play into that. And then the moment anyone sort of raises any questions, he just sort of deploys Bok and scares the
Yes.
bejesus out of them, and that kind of undermines the question of whether any of them are, because the stuff with the squire, especially, you think, they could have gone somewhere else with that, and then the sort of the cult members, like Matthew Corbett turns up in episode 5 without Sooty.
does he?
Yes, Matthew Corbett
Good
is the
Lord.
one that. Matthew Corbett is the one that leans over to Roger Delgado when he's about to sacrifice Joe, and so does the whole. Don't you think this is going a bit too far?
I did wonder if you were paying attention when I pointed that out 5 minutes ago. So
Oh, sorry, did you? Oh, God. Ah.
don't worry, Richard
get
will
it.
edit it seamlessly.
Yeah.
How did that slip past me? I must have been looking up something else on it. Dear, oh dear. The perils of live research.
It would have been cool if, like what you were saying is sort of like, I don't know, Azal feeds off the demons of the people in the village or something, and that's what the master is trying to get, because he's like, oh, you've been fiddling at the post office and whatever. That would have been really cool, but yeah, it kind of boils down to the typical kind of Doctor Who, ooh, spooky monster moment. Yeah.
There was a bit by the maypole that struck me particularly that I thought this has reached a really interesting point where he talks about how they the Master's almost promising them a little village utopia, and they'd be in their isolated little pocket of weirdness. But yes, then it crumbles very rapidly. But at that moment, I thought there's potentially a more interesting thread in here, because it does the plot runs out of steam in sort of the middle of episode 3 and only kind of picks up again the end of halfway through episode 5. I did find myself flagging a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's interesting stuff in there that I don't think was fully explored.
He could have offered to John Scott Martin the opportunity not to have to sit in the Dalek ever again.
Yeah, he does some good mumble acting, doesn't he?
Actually, I think the best of that is Bert, the landlord, who the amount of nodding he does when he's in the scene with the Master towards. I mean, it's extraordinary. He's definitely bigging up his part there.
Do you know Matthew Corbett's in episode 5 as well?
No.
Oh dear. I completely blanked that.
The other thing that makes me laugh is Richard Franklin trying to wrestle with the guy who's running off with the helicopter. He's definitely an unequal struggle, isn't it? He's never going to be Unit's muscle.
No.
Bless him with his little punches and everything.
Yeah.
I was going to go on to not much muscle with Benton and the cloak scene.
Yes.
Oh, it made me laugh today.
Yeah.
It's the it's the rate at which he drops.
Yes,
like the
lead weight.
Yeah.
It's a lead weight laced with chloroform, and he just goes boom when the cloak touches him. It's wonderful.
Well, I think we talked about on Invasion of the Dinosaurs that John Levine is very good at dropping like a stone, and the bit where the bit in that where Pertwee knocks him out, and he apparently just goes, he says, "Go on then, Doctor, knock me out," and Pertwee does not make any effort to stop him from basically bashing his face on the floor. He just goes over like apparently just goes down like a felled tree. And, bastard.
He keeps clubbing him while he's still on the ground. just stay there.
Yeah.
John, he accidentally calls him John. Stay down, John.
I mean, there's also this thing about the demon appearing 3 times, which seems a little bit extraneous. I mean, the first time, I mean, he's got to appear once, I suppose, and then he has to have a bit of a chew over how it's going on before he comes the last time. But what's the middle one for, other than to fill in a bit in the middle episode?
Well, this is it. It goes back to the slight bugbear I have that there's sort of occult trappings that aren't readily explained, and that thing that prescribing that Azal will appear 3 times. It would have been nice if there was a logical reason for that. That like his ship has 3 power cycles or something, and just some arbitrary thing that says, and that's why it's entered into occult imagery that Devil will present 3 times because of whatever his phone needs recharging.
The first one's to gather data, the second one's to do something else, and the third one is to
clear his browser history.
It's nice that you get at the end of episode 3, just as Azal's coming back, it's the Master who's in danger, and we sort of end up with it on the cliffhanger with. So I mean, I guess it's the 5th story on the trot with the Master in it, and so even if we love to hate him, we still get a little bit worried that he might be disappearing off, maybe.
But it's also a nice change to have a plot dynamic be the cliffhanger rather than.
Yes.
I mean, it is jeopardy, but the cliffhanger is in as much the implications of what's going on.
Yeah.
So, you're left wondering what's going on. I'll just repeat myself. I have to repeat myself 3 times before it makes sense.
Do you know Matthew Corbett's in this?
Matthew Corbett must appear 3 times before the podcast is over.
So episode 4
Busy, busy, let's get busy.
is the only one that's in decent shape. I mean, did you use that as a source for the colour stuff at all, or is it?
Not really. No, there was some useful colour reference, but by and large, it was tidying up fringing around objects. So if you look further from the object, you can see the true colour that it was meant to be. We worked on about 7 minutes throughout 4 episodes, picking some of the most offensive bits. So there's plenty where nothing's been touched, but it's not too bad. But there were some scenes that were really standout examples of stuff that was distracting. The guys did the 5 rounds rapid scene, which actually wasn't on the shot list that was requested, but we thought it would be nice to make sure that the most famous scene looked as nice as it possibly could.
Yeah. Would you say the Benton trousers thing was the worst that you had to fix, or was there another that was worse than that?
Benton's trousers were about the worst, but there were quite a lot of very purple skies and purple with yellow stripes at times. The scene where the Doctor's talking to Osgood, there's quite a long bit that got colour corrected to restore the sky to a more natural blue colour.
Right.
The shot at the beginning when Miss Hawthorne's talking to the medical doctor, and there was some nasty bleeding into the colour of the car, so that got fixed as well. So that was quite a good early example. But yeah, there's a scene where is it the Brigadier on the radio in the foreground, and someone comes towards him to give a report, or vice versa, I can't remember. But there were lots of objects in that scene that were interfering with each other, so there was a lot of work done on that.
Well, I think it was well worth it. I think it looks fantastic on Blu-ray.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks. And with the upscale,
Yeah.
all of the restoration techniques combined, it scrubs up very nicely.
Completely random observation that apparently Miss Hawthorne's cloak is Margaret Rutherford's. Miss Marple cloak.
I don't know. Apparently they were friends in real life.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Apparently Margaret Rutherford lent Damaris Hayman her cloak.
Brilliant.
Which is rather good. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that it was a lot of filming in freezing cold weather, and that Morris dancing in particular, and the maypole looks absolutely blooming freezing cold. I've never seen anything that looked less like May in my life.
Although I suppose it was May, though, I believe.
Was it? Okay, well, it was just flipping cold May. I suppose May is quite cold.
I think, or am I imagining that? That seems very early ahead of them for them to have been filming it. Maybe I'm thinking of transmission dates.
I remember Christopher Barry saying at one point it snowed, didn't it? Like when they woke up in the hotel or something like that, they opened up the curtains and could see snow, sort of thing, and they were like, "What the hell do we do?"
Yeah.
Near cast the clout till May's out.
When did they? Yes, indeed. Well, it was for 19th of April.
Right. Okay.
1971. They were filming it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And they broadcast in late May. Blimey.
Yeah, I think the turnaround was insane because they had to eat into the post-production time because of the filming on location. I think Christopher Barry was kind of like filming almost live because they just needed to cut the shots into place as quickly as possible just to get it out.
Wow.
Well, as I understand it, they tried some very innovative and possibly not entirely successful filming technique for this, where they actually had 3 film cameras on location. They were filming it as you would like a studio set up. They got some new tech for syncing up the sound, I believe, or that was involved in syncing cameras, and so as an experiment, because they were nearing the end of the series, obviously, they used this thing so they were able to hook everything up, and so they were able to record 3 separate camera angles on the same shots at one time. But apparently they decided it was not worth the wasn't worth the effort in terms of having to have three cameramen and assistants plus the extra footage being shot. Just the sheer cost of film. Apparently didn't work out as being, they weren't able to bank as much, but that at least explains why they were able to get a lot of stuff on film for this.
Yeah. it always looks beautiful on film. I think Doctor Who on film is just gorgeous.
Yeah, I guess particularly the bit right at the end. I mean, it actually does start to look like it might have been a warmer day. That the final scenes, and then the panning back out. That does look particularly nice.
Well, I think there was some stuff where the sun suddenly came out blazing hot. I think it might be the tail end of the stuff with the Morris men. Before
the
zapped
Morris dancing scenes shot
and
over
apparently
2 days.
they suddenly had a whole load of very strong shadows and had to get in arc lights to flood fill, because they suddenly found they had a load of shadows which didn't make sense in terms of what else they'd shot. So they had to get in arc lights to try and balance things out. Complete nightmare. And that's without Katie Manning wearing the wrong outfit for the Morris dancing scene.
Was she?
That's why Pertwee sends her off in the penultimate scene to say, go off and get out of your sacrificial robes, back into your civvies.
Because he's not normally all that concerned, is he? With
so she goes trotting off back into the pub.
yes.
Without carrying her clothes. Apparently she's carrying the clothes as she gets out of the church before the church blows up. She's not.
Okay.
She's then not carrying the clothes in that scene, which was like a late pickup, because they realised they had shot the Maypole scene with her back in civvies, so they had to write in an excuse, a sequence for her to get back into civvies. And talking of civvies, I was just going to say one thing about, in general, I think that's one of the reasons why early 70s Doctor Who stands up possibly better. You kind of think, okay, what we were talking about when you do see them in civvies, I think given it was like the worst time for them to decide to strand the Doctor on Earth, and they were lucky they did it in a military context in that regard. So it's not quite as bad in terms of the fashions as it would be if it was full Jason King all over the place.
It is funny that everyone keeps they're in the pub and everyone keeps saying, "Oh, we should go out and look for somebody," and they say, "No, we've got to stay in the pub." It's almost as if there's a restriction on those actors being out on film or something because they're absolutely desperate to stay in the pub for quite long periods.
What was the 70s?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a fairly unforgiving thing for Courtney, for Nick Courtney, actually, in terms of he gets stuck in his own. I mean, we're lucky he's in fine fettle.
Yeah.
Because I was just thinking, well, he does basically get to his entire story is to be standing out somewhere in the countryside until like the last 10 minutes. Yeah. He's basically standing outside in the countryside, shouting at Osgood, and occasionally having other people come up and meet him and talk to him from about 30 feet away.
Yeah. and then when he does turn up, the Doctor goes, "What's the point of you? You haven't got nothing."
Has the link been established between that Osgood and new series Osgood? I assume it has, but I've never checked.
Not as far as I'm aware. I think people have just kind of through the ether gone, "Oh yeah, they must be related," kind of thing. But it's never been confirmed on the screen, I don't think. But I mean, I just kind of went, "Oh, I get it, Moffat, what you're doing," kind of thing. Yeah, whether or not they'll establish that sort of later on, who knows?
And are the pair of them then related to that other Osgood that's in the Seeds of Death?
Yes. Yeah, we should draw up a family tree.
Yeah.
Well, I saw something in the production notes that apparently Alec Linstead really didn't get on with Pertwee.
Oh right.
Linstead, who played Osgood. But sadly, the production notes that were then completely unforthcoming in juicy gossip about what and why. So I was left hanging. So if anyone,
wasn't it something to do with like he couldn't get the lines out, the guy who plays Osgood or something, and Pertwee got annoyed. I think that was like one of the reasons why he went away on the bike.
Ah.
Oh, I think it might have been a continuity thing, because when Pertwee draws the circuit board on the glass, I think like something had gone wrong and they were like, "Oh no, we need to clean it, it's all wrong." And I think there was a bunch of stuff basically that just happened.
Ah, right. Oh well, wouldn't be the first time he'd been in a grump, I guess.
It's quite funny also that they go from country lane to, with the helicopter chase, suddenly they're in an airfield.
Yeah.
But we'll let that one pass, I guess. It's nice to see it to have a helicopter.
Yeah,
Yes,
the helicopter stunts are awesome. Like, I think, like, 60s Doctor Who as well. Like, they really went all out with their helicopter stunts.
Well, Barry, of course, directed. Yeah,
Oh,
Barry
yes.
directed Enemy
Yeah.
of the World,
Yes.
so he was fond of a chopper. For now.
Scurrilous rumour there.
The happily married man. Lovely bloke, actually, and his wife was very nice as well. I met them a few times. So, back in the day, back in my convention running days.
I was interested to hear about their writing process, which was that Barry Letts threw together a first draft, gave that to Robert Sloman. He then did an interim draft and handed that back to Barry Letts, who then rewrote it again into the version that was then handed to Terrance Dicks, and Terrance Dicks then polished it into the final iteration. Because I'm always fascinated by how different writing teams collaborate. And it's a shame Paul's not here tonight to talk about that, because I like picking his brain on his writing process with his writing partner. Because some writers, writing teams, writing duos, I've heard them talk about how one will sit at the typewriter and the other will stride around the room, and they will essentially improvise the dialogue, and when they're happy the scene feels right, they'll commit it to the page, or one will essentially dictate and the other will filter it as they type. It interests me that they were writing whole iterations of the script and passing that backwards and forwards rather than sitting down and collaborating on a scene-by-scene basis.
Yeah. So Bob Baker was talking about writing style, and he was definitely of they sit together in the same room and one of them's at a typewriter. But whereas this sounds more like the Elton John, Bernie Taupin method of, they'll have a crack at it but not in the same place.
Oh, interesting. And the whole thing came from an audition piece for Joe Grant originally, didn't it?
Yeah.
It was,
And Richard Franklin, wasn't it? The two of them.
Oh, I suppose it would have been at the same time, actually.
For the pair of them, which is why it ends up the pair of them in the crypt, essentially rehashing that audition scene.
I hadn't thought, of course, they'd have been recruiting, casting him at the same time, wouldn't they? Yeah.
I think that's right.
Yeah, that would figure.
Going back to Osgood, I love that there's a lever that's marked boost.
Dispenses chocolate bars.
Yeah. And I also noted that it's not just the Chibnall era where there's a lot of exposition. The first part of episode 5 there was an astonishing amount of exposition for about sort of 4 or 5 minutes. But yeah, I mean, fair enough. It wasn't too grating, but I just thought, they've sort of explained the plot an awful lot there.
It's funny, isn't it? It does happen a lot in Doctor Who and in all kinds of things, and often people will overlook it depending on how broadly they feel positively or negatively about the story. But if they don't especially like the story, it'll be used as another reason to attack it. But to actually essentially have a slideshow where they sit all of the cast down and explain the plot with slides is not the most elegant way of doing things, but it's fine.
Well, it's of the era, definitely. Your church hall slideshow for that sort of thing. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, because I wasn't particularly aware of Who Mourns for Adonais, but I did write, it's a Star Trek ending. This does not compute. I mean, as one of you said, there's at least 3 or 4 that are a bit like that. Plus the sort of standard Moffat ending of Love Conquers All mixed together, really. But if it's completely lifted from that Star Trek episode, then I'll let Moffat off this time.
I do. I mean, it comes back to that thing of how we interpret the quote-unquote science, magical alien science, but the idea that Joe's compassion causes Azal to short-circuit as if he's a confused robot, I find a little bit jarring.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like that's been set up terribly well, that he's that logical.
No.
That he's going to
and the doctor's... Because I sent a message to someone today jokingly saying, is Azal a cyborg? But then the doctor comes out and he says, "Well, you could say he's blown a fuse." And I thought, well, you could say that if he was a robot, and he's not. So what kind of explanation is that? Yeah. It's confusing.
Yeah.
There was a cut line slightly earlier in the dialogue about his program, about him fulfilling his program. No, I can't. Yeah, no, it's gonna bother me. It slipped past on the production subtitles, and I didn't think anything of it at the time. But now you've mentioned that.
I mean, if Azal was a cyborg, I mean, it would make a hell of a lot of sense, kind of thing. But obviously, that just did not translate onto the screen at all.
No, I don't think it's intentional. But I mean, I do have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about. I mean, I prefer Doctor Who to be science fiction, and the closer it leans into fantasy, the more frustrated I get, because I suppose because the show so frequently insists on doing this sort of there's no such thing as magic, it's all science and it's all explicable, but then it never carries through in a way that makes sense. And there's another example that frustrates me, and that's in the Shakespeare Code, and the dialogue that explains the goings on says something like, your science on Earth is based on mathematics and theirs is based on language, so what you think of as spells are scientific formulae, and you're meant to swallow this. But what deeply frustrates me is that there's still no technology on show in that story, because if that's your analogy, then that's like saying, well, if you just shout a telephone number into the air, that's how you speak to someone in another country. You still need the telephone. The numbers on their own don't do anything. You can't just say, oh, maths versus language, and that explains it. The language has to plug into something. It has to program something, and Logopolis has a similar issue.
Yeah, I find that with a lot of like Chris Chibnall's writing is that like he'll do a lot of exposition and say, "Oh, this thing happens when you do this," and you're like, "Cool, show us it," kind of thing, because otherwise we're just kind of left there with there's so much suspension of disbelief kind of thing, and to actually physically show. I mean, at least with Logopolis, I guess. You physically see entropy happen when they all die and they're not talking numbers and stuff. But as you said, like there's no real technology. They're using
abacus.
Abacus, that's the word. Sort of thing.
Like in the Shakespeare Code, I always wanted that just to be an alien circuit board under the cauldron or something. Yeah, exactly. Rather than the fact that the cauldron just is a view screen because it's a story about witches. Yeah, you just take a panel off and it's got a slow circuit. Yeah. Actually, I'm just thinking of Time Flight now as well, when he's got his mystic ball and then you see the circuitry underneath, sort of thing. It's like, it's a shorthand for saying there is more going on than meets the eye kind of thing. Yeah.
Well done, Time Flight.
Yeah.
It sounded like you were going to leap in, Giles, and defend.
I was possibly going to, and this is my self-justification of so on, that I think that what's going on in the Shakespeare Code is setting up the Archangel network from Last of the Time Lords. 14 sides of the globe, 15 satellites in the Archangel network that reflect the Doctor's name around the world. Long time since I've seen that.
I'm missing the link. I mean, I remember the bits, but I don't see how that helped in Shakespeare times.
The sort of magnified... but in Shakespeare times, I agree, you're right. But
the satellite network was considerably less sophisticated.
Yeah, fair enough. I kind of go for it on... Yeah, I kind of let it have a pass on the grounds of the metaphor or whatever, rather than... But then I like seasons. I'm the guy that likes season 3.
Oh, you're the one.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Series 3, even.
So, Ellie, Gav was saying that you were involved in some filming in Aldbourne, was it?
Yes, for the Blu-ray box set, The Devil's Weekend.
And I mean, it still looked surprisingly similar, as I recall from watching that extra.
It's like going in a time machine. I mean, you literally... It's like walking onto a set. Like, the whole village just hasn't changed in the slightest. All the buildings are the same. I mean, even the people, you know, the villagers that were sort of tiny dots that you see on the old films and stuff, like the behind the scenes, they're now adults, and you know, they got kids and everything. They're sort of like a real sort of like close-knit community kind of thing. But it's really lovely to go and visit, because it, you know, everything's the same. So you're like, oh, I remember that's the bit where he says 5 rounds rapid, and then like 30 minutes up from the village is where Devil's Mounds are and stuff like that, so you can go and visit that. It's not a bad walk, actually. And yeah, it's just sort of like eerily calm up there as well, because I remember when we were filming, we were chasing the rain. Like, the rain always kept going opposite to us, which was just like really, really fortunate. But I just remember sort of like we were looking over and we could see the rain coming down, and a rainbow just appeared, and I just remember like me and Katie and everybody just looking over at each other like, that's John over there, that's John Pertwee looking at us at the moment. And it was just like a really, really lovely time, super busy, sort of just trying to get everything filmed and stuff. But there's so many good stories from like the villagers and that they've still got pictures, they've still got autographs of them at the time. Like there was one person who had Roger Delgado's signature and stuff, and he was showing me photos. So yeah, it was just a nice little community that I think are really appreciative of Doctor Who. It just never has left them. And I mean, they even got like Dalek bins and TARDIS bins and stuff like that, and the cloven hoof sign still sort of outside the pub, and you know, you can go and have a meal and whatever. So yeah, it was wonderful, like really sort of good experience. And it's funny because this was the first time I'd ever been up there, and I only live sort of like half an hour, 40 minutes away, and you know, it was a good enough excuse to sort of like have Katie Manning take you in your arms, showing you around and stuff, which was just so lovely. I mean, I just adore her so much. Yeah, it was wonderful, it was lovely.
Bro.
Was it a single day?
2 days.
2 days.
Yeah.
You
So
stayed there?
no, I didn't, because I lived just sort of down the road. I was the runner, so I did all the supply runs. I got all the snacks and the drinks and all that kind of stuff ready for them, because it was cold. It was absolutely freezing. And I mean, climbing the church tower, because of COVID and everything, we had to be sort of really careful on how many people did certain things, and we all had to keep our distance. So you probably see it in the documentary, like we're all spaced apart and stuff. But you know, everything felt safe. And yeah, and the drone shots of like Oldbourne sort of round the church and everything was just stunning. It's a shame that they never actually filmed in the church itself for the episode, because it's like stunning inside. But I think it was something to do with the vicar just didn't want them in there at the time.
Right.
But I think the vicar now, like lovely lady, was just like, yeah, if they ever came back, and then, you know, come straight in kind of thing. Yeah, if anybody gets a chance, I would like highly recommend it, because it is just walking onto a Doctor Who set.
Bro. Is there anything else anyone wanted to say about the Demons?
Related to the church, I gather they did kind of tread on eggshells around the sort of Christianity elements of the scripts, didn't they? That they had to, they turned the cavern underneath, because it was a crypt, and then they kind of they turned it into an ancient cavern or something. To
the scenes that ended up being a crypt were originally meant to be church scenes,
right?
So it was supposed to be stuff set in the church. And they budgeted to build a church set, and then they said we want to be careful. There were mutterings at the time in the press about whether Doctor Who was too inappropriate, too horrific, so they were just trying to be careful. So they toned down all of the religious references, changed the church to a crypt,
but then blew the church up.
Yep. The coup de grace. Random fact, it's the only commissioned 5-part Doctor Who story.
Okay. Because the other one gained one and lost one.
Yeah. It's the Mind Robber was an accident. And the Dominators. Yeah.
Was also an accident, yeah. In a different way.
The whole thing, yeah.
Yes, frankly. So, a science nerd thing. They dress up all this. I'm not as hung up on my Doctor Who having to be sciencey as Gav is, but it does slightly wrinkle with me, or rankle rather, when they shoot for something and then they miss it. They try and make something sound very sciencey, and you think, oh, that's clever, that's a really good idea, and then they botch it. And the whole thing with E=mc², and that explaining the releases and exchanges of heat and so on, and yet they've just set up in the second episode that the spaceship, despite having shrunk in size, weighs exactly as much as it did. So it's still got the same mass.
Right.
So there's no
pick it up because it's 750 tons.
Yes.
Good point.
So it's slightly. I thought, hang on.
Also, if they were losing that amount of mass, as anyone works out, C² is a hell of a lot of E, isn't it?
True.
Probably blow up the Earth. Sorry, go on.
Where is it coming from? Which bits of Azal is he losing? Is it every other atom, or does he have 5 legs when he's full size?
It's the same thing as with the giant robot. It just everything gets bigger, everything gets smaller.
But then you're not losing mass.
Yeah.
Because you could shrink the gaps between the atoms, couldn't you?
Well.
But then you would have no energy release.
Yeah, well. My final thought on this is I want to see the story that's happening at Satan Hall.
Oh, yes.
Which
Just
is apparently
on
8 miles away on the incredible spinning signpost.
Yeah.
It's Satan Hall. It's like, how did they know it was Devil's End rather than Satan Hall they had to go to?
Dear Russell T Davies.
Frankly, yeah.
Do you want a couple of minutes before we dive into the other one?
Yes.
Sounds like a good idea.
We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, here's a clip from my other podcast.
Hi Richard, how are you?
Yeah, fine, thanks, Emily. How about you?
I'm mostly okay. I've just got a lot on at the moment, and I've got to prepare a report, catch up on emails, look at my team's messages, review a piece of work for someone in the team, create a presentation on the next month's activities, focus on my BAU, anything ad hoc that's coming in. Then I've also got some personal bits and pieces that I've got to fit into my week. I've got to take my son here, I've got to do that with him. I need to go and see my mum at some point. Oh, and I want to go and see my friends. Oh, and find some time for myself.
Emily, take a breath. You don't seem quite yourself. Are you really okay?
Welcome to our next episode of If It's Hurting, It's Not Working. And this time we're going to talk a little bit more about mental health.
Yeah, and look, I mean, this time of the year, it's cold, it's dark a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
We've been stuck in our homes, some of us, over the last couple of months, more than we would have liked. So I guess, in a sense, we're feeling a bit lonely, perhaps, maybe a bit unfulfilled. So it's definitely a time for us to think about what that's doing to us.
Do you know what? I'm actually feeling really flat. Like, we've just had a really nice Christmas period. Now we're all back to working from home where we can. And I'm just not feeling motivated about it. January is a bit of a blue month anyway. Like you said, the weather's rubbish. You're too fat because you've eaten all of the Christmas sweets and things like that. There's so much pressure to go out there and dry January and go out and get fit and join the gym and create a new you and a new body. And actually, do you know what? That's the last thing that I want to think about in January. And I think the other thing that I've recognised as well is that loneliness of working from home on the laptop with nobody else about. Some people find that heaven. I find that hell. And I've really noticed it over the last few weeks. I'm an extrovert and I get all of my energy off of people. And I do find that my partner's noticed it as well. When he comes home and I haven't seen anybody, I've had no deliveries from the postman through the door. I've got to that stage when the postman's almost my best friend and the cat's going, will you please stop talking to me? he walks through the door, and and in the evening he's like just had a busy day at work. He's been interacting with people because he's been in the office and seen people, so he's all right.
Yeah.
And he comes through the door, and I go, blah, 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 and he's like, oh my god, you can. And he says to me, are you going into the office this week?
So,
You've forgotten it as well, haven't you?